You're listening to UnitedWeStrike.com radio. Don't buy, don't comply. Ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com radio.
Well, that time, I think the transfer did make it across the pond. You're live with the United We Strike Marathon on November 9th, 2013. It's darn near bedtime over in England, about 10:30 in the evening right now. Here in Washington, D.C., where I am, it's about 5:30. If you're out on the West Coast, you've still got a little bit of sun left. It's only about 2:30 for you. But the transfer across the pond did work. We're now broadcasting live from my secret underground bunker just 12 miles south of Washington, D.C. And the first presenter I'm going to bring on tonight is our friend Lark in Texas. And he's got a guest with him tonight, a lady named Nikki. I'm going to go ahead and bring them live right now. Let's see what they've got to tell us. Well, Lark, it's all yours, man. I gave you a nice intro. I think we're ready to rock and roll, man. Turning it over to you.
You're the man, Gary. Thanks so much. Welcome to United We Strike, everyone. And if you'll permit me, I want to introduce my special guest to you today. Her name is Nikki Rapana. If we're fortunate, her daughter, Nordica Friedrich, will also be joining us. Now, Nikki is one of my favorite people in the whole world. I discovered her website on the internet in 2004, shortly after I first got online. I was a late adapter, mind you. And the name of her website is called Living Outside the Dialectic. Very easy to find. Nikki, N-I-K-I, Rapana, R-A-A-P as in Paul, A-N-A.blogspot.com. I also discovered her research work. There was quite a repository. For some time, it became a bit unwieldy. And the name of that, though, can still be searched and found at archive.org, and it's written as the Anti-Communitarian League. And in particular, I have her research page pulled up today for my own benefit, perhaps yourselves. Nikki and her daughter Nordica Friedrich are the co-authors of the Anti-Communitarian Manifesto, as well as 2020, Our Common Destiny. Now, both of these books are available as one ebook currently on the internet. Just do a search, Living Outside the Dialectic. Go to Nikki's blog and you'll see the cover of the book at the very top on the right-hand side. Just click on that, and I can promise you that is some of the best invaluable reading that anyone could have under their belt in terms of how we navigate this new world order. So, Nikki, how you be? Are you standing outside in the snow?
No, I came inside. It's a lot of traffic today, too.
Oh, you chicken. So were there any wolves or bears outside as you peered outside?
Oh, yeah, they're everywhere.
Well,
I'm in town. I'm in town now.
Ah, okay. Well, just for the benefit of our listeners, I know you live approximately 250 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska, and that you've been living up there for some time in a quite rural area, perhaps semi-rural now, I'm not sure.
No, but it's rural.
Yeah, it's very rural. And I know that you live year-round in a gurti, which is a Mongolian yurt of sorts. Is that correct?
Yeah, we make our own. We call them gurti. It's a big part of how we've been able to accomplish the research, because we're non-grant funded and solely self-supporting to our own contributions, just like AA. And that's how we manage to maintain control over all our content. We don't censor any topic. It has been a real challenge to keep it going. So one of the things we did was cut back. We lived simply, and we started modifying our tent into a yurt after the first winter in a tent. I actually was doing like a pioneer thing. I wanted to know if I had it in me to do what the people did in Alaska 100 years ago, even just for a couple months. With electric, though. I wasn't off the grid or anything, It was just this wonderful time. And I write really well when I'm in tiny spaces, when it's 50 below outside. If I got a roaring fire going, I can do some good reading. And I really needed time. We worked on this in the city the first 6-7 years. So going to the country and digesting everything that we had been studying, and Lark, you've read it. I was busting through that stuff. Everything was going up. I didn't take out any. I would pick a topic and see what it had to do with communitarianism, and it would fill 30 pages of just all straight links. It was nuts how much I was able to find. In the beginning, I had to really search, and now there's so much on communitarianism on the internet now that I can't keep up. So the team is growing. We got a couple of people that we've met through Facebook and through my blog, many people through the blog that are starting to do their own research, taking it in different directions, putting a different view behind it. And it's fascinating for me and Orca to watch what people do with this information when they get it, because it's very helpful if you want to understand how you're being manipulated, besides the Delphi technique when you go to the meetings, because that's pretty well covered. Some good research has been done on that. That's not one of the areas we touched, because what we actually did was everything that was not out there for us to find, that we had to study and find ourselves, that's when we started publishing. We weren't repeating what anybody else was doing. We would just send the links. If there was a good link, how many good people are, Joan Beyond's work was great. There was a lot of people that I wouldn't send it to today that I did back then. But still, there was a lot of people that were covering the education part of it, deliberate dumbing down of America. Charlotte Iserbyt's work. Dee Kidd was exposing a lot of Jerry Lynn Ball's stuff, She wrote about communitarianism in the 90s from a very right-wing perspective, but she still was writing about it. And
what was that called? That was Masters of Deception, I believe, by Jerry Lynn Ball.
And Time Bomb was the one that I got from Daniel New. They used to do UN Free Zones a long time ago. Michael New and that whole, they were Texans too, very nice men. They sent me a copy of Time Bomb when they saw my work, because we put our work out there in 2003, and I sent it to everybody that I had found that was even writing about any of the same topics like Agenda 21 or any of the legal issues that we were dealing with ourselves. I just thought that more people would be interested in knowing the name of the law. But that's like the main thing. The word communitarianism is out there now. It's this vague, lovely community theory that nobody quite explains or understands, but you'll never hardly ever hear anybody talking about communitarian law. And that was the focus of all our research. We spent 3 years in the courts. I was involved in 7 different civil lawsuits against the city for actions, because the police actions started in the 90s in our neighborhood in Seattle. So this is a long time that people have been under the gun, so to speak, for these programs. And I spent, a lot of the early research was finding other case law. When Kilo versus the city of New London happened, and I think it was 2005, it just blew everything right out of the water for us, because that was really the core of what we were dealing with in Seattle, was best use principles, And
well, let me do this.
Best use.
Let me do this for the benefit of our listeners, Nikki. I want to direct you to the website known as archive.org. Archive is singular.org. And if you'll type in nord.twu.net, you will come to the original anti-communitarian league website that I was exposed to in 2004. And on a page entitled Research, I note, again for the benefit of the listeners, Nikki, that you have quite a compendium of useful information, particularly as it's relative to communitarian law, community government, the communitarian councils, all that research is right there.
Yeah. The
And
courts and the official agencies involved. All of
And
that.
it is
Yes.
community law or communitarian law, which is the foundational law of today's European Union. Yes.
Yes. Monet and Schumann slipped it into the steel negotiations back in the 50s. There's about 50 years of case law now in Luxembourg. It's all in French, which I don't speak or read, but it's called the Acquis Communautaire, which is the accumulated communitarian law, and it's the supremacy clause in the European Constitution that actually the French and the Dutch voters rejected it via referendums because of the supremacy of communitarian law clause. So Europeans are real familiar with the law, at least the ones that I've run across. And in England now, quite a few people get it there too. Ireland, when they rejected the Constitution, I was so excited. I had pictures of the Irish all over our website.
And then I remember that.
I was so excited. I was like, the Irish said no, they get it. And there was this one woman that they interviewed on the way out that they asked her why she voted no, and she said, well, I couldn't understand it, and I figured that anything I can't understand can't be good for the Irish. And I just wanted to use that quote forever, because that's it. If you don't understand it, then what is it? Our law is so simple. The Bill of Rights is one page, the original 10. Okay.
And I love the line you provided one time after you're coming out of one of those so-called meetings or planning sessions, the stakeholder meetings in Seattle when you lived in Seattle, and the lady asked you, Nikki, don't you want to live in a nice community?
Yeah.
I love your response.
I said, I thought I lived in a nice community. It was nice until you got here. And so the people, and at the time, I was mainly middle class through my adult life, okay? I was married to money a little bit, not really money, but status, okay? Status and good job. So I had always had, not always, but I had come from that background, so I had a little different perspective on being poor. I had never been homeless, and I was dealing with people in these lawsuits in Seattle who lived right on the edge. And when the raid happened, because they were doing pilot tests of the new enforcement procedures in '99 in Seattle, where they were going into people's houses, privately owned rental homes, and taking everybody hostage for hours, looking through all their stuff, reading their mail, making lists of the books that were on their shelves. I mean, it was intense. And this is how I got into the international level, was because the police in Seattle, one of the interviews that I was doing, I was asking him if we were pilot tests because I was studying the COPS program, and I was wanting him to identify which COPS program we were under, and he said, yes, it was a pilot test for the WTO.
And of course, COPS is the community-oriented policing services.
Yes, and I was talking, and the Seattle police, when I would ask them if they were a community cop or if they were a community cop, the ones that weren't community cops always answered, no, I'm a real cop. So I knew this federal agency that was infiltrating the Seattle Police Department and acting like they were neighborhood cops. They called themselves community policing, neighborhood cops, and they were the ones that were sitting on all the planning meetings for different new invasive home inspections that they wanted to perform, because it's a health and safety issue. Now they have to know if you do your dishes every day, or what you do with your garbage, or how you treat your children, if they get a bath every night, all of that. These were, in this, the city attorney's office, at the top 10 life-threatening things that could be witnessed by city agents who were already in your home for another reason. And most of the agencies in Seattle told the city attorney's office, no, we're not going to go in people's homes and start doing all this extra stuff for you. And under the Domestic Violence Act in 1995, the firefighters or the firemen had all agreed, okay, to do this extra spying for signs of abuse was what their thing was. And the firefighters in Seattle assured me that they just weren't doing it. But I said, yeah, but you agreed to do it. So now they're expanding that to City Light and, the telephone company. Everybody who comes inside your home has, under it's called Interdepartmental Training Program, they're required to put all this information about people into this database that they started building a long time ago. It was called HUD 2020. And that word the year 2020 came up so often in so many of their programs that's why we called the book 2020 Our Common Destiny, because it's pretty clear to us that is the target year that the entire globe is supposed to be under the supremacy of communitarian law. That's the goal that we're following.
Well, and so what it seems to be occurring is that many of our fellows have been licensed, credentialed, been given permission to essentially become communitarians. Isn't that fair to say?
Well, yes, they're lucrative programs. When I asked the Department of Neighborhoods, the new director that they had put in over what was called the, what was that called? NATS, Neighborhood Action Team Seattle. And Veronica Jackson was her name, and super nice gal. But when I started asking my questions, because primarily I was interested in when these home invasions were going to start, because they had already planned them. And I was at the police station at a meeting with about 30 heads of the stations around the entire Seattle area. And so it was a big cop meeting. And I was so new to the research, I had to ask what SPD was. I was like, what organization is that? There's so many, because there was so many, what do they call it, alphabet soup. I had to learn DAWN, NAT, all these programs had acronym, letter names. So anyway, when I found out it was SPG, I was like, oh, okay. So that meeting was when they were going to go forward with this huge inspection program on every rental property in the city of Seattle. They were going to make it a business so that you had to be taxed and licensed in order to rent your property. And then they had committees already set up and trained to look at the applications for the potential renters, and the city councils were going to, or these little community councils, were going to decide if those tenants were allowed to move into the neighborhood or not. It was intense. So there was so many different ways that they were presenting this, but the underlying whole thing was they were rebuilding community, was the name of the big program. And that's what led us to Agenda 21, because within that whole international plan is the plan for rebuilding community in every member nation in the United Nations in the world. And I'm learning a lot too, Lark. It's like down in Panama, in Cologne, they had an uprising in the streets against this type of development that was coming in and was going to, renew and rebuild. And what they do is they rebuild and run everybody out of the poor neighborhoods. They're going after, the low income and the poor and the elderly in the United States. Near the U districts, they want only corporate-owned stores inside their plans. I started going to meetings all over Seattle for the U district and Roosevelt neighborhood and the Green Lake, and Lake City, everywhere, and seeing it was the same plan in every neighborhood. That's pretty obvious. But there was 28 neighborhood plans adopted by Seattle in '99, and 9 members of City Council never read any of them, and they just blanket approved every one of these plans. And that's
so there's a whole lot of folks involved in planning our lives for us, then, isn't there?
Oh yes, and they have a very sure attitude about the types of people that they do not want, and it's everything from. Poor people, they're ugly, okay? They wear dirty clothes and they drive shitty cars, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of them. That's it's not even racist. It's classist. It's very classist because it doesn't matter what color, what background you have, or what language you speak. If you got money, you're okay. In fact, they write right in the plans the ideal tenants in the newly developed neighborhoods are, middle-income couples with no children. So,
all right, we've got about 5 minutes left, Nikki. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a brief mention of a couple of things. First of all, I want to make mention of my own website, larkintexas.blogspot.com. Remember, this series is entitled The Sum of All Things. Start in the beginning. You'll see much reference to Nikki's work in my own work. Nikki's website, nikkirapana.blogspot.com. The easiest thing to do is just do a search, Living Outside the Dialectic. You'll find it right there. And I must say, you must read this book. It's 2 books in one, folks. 2 books in one. And it's one of the most invaluable resources that I personally have. And it's helped me tremendously in terms of what am I faced with? Who and or what is the enemy? Because I want to know how to navigate this cultural, social, and economic milieu that we all find ourselves in today. Now, I want to make mention my friend Robin Eubanks, the attorney in Atlanta, who has written a book entitled Credentialed to Destroy: How and Why Education Became a Weapon. And also, my friend Vicki Davis at channelingreality.com, and her most recent entry entitled World War III, which is where she discusses the UN Participatory Act of 1945 and how it is updated annually. And we will see this collision of socialism, communism, capitalism, corporatism that Nikki talks about in her writings with the word communitarianism. And I know that in 2010, Nikki, you wrote that this is probably the most important word that anybody can learn about in order to navigate this life. And you wrote that in an article for a UK column entitled Our Common Community. And I love that piece. I have read it a dozen times. Our Common Community at ukcolumn.org. I highly recommend it, folks. But getting back to my friend Robin, who writes about Common Core and education issues, Nikki, in the final few minutes here, she writes in her title of her new book on Amazon, Credentialed to Destroy: How and Why Education Became a Weapon. Do you agree that we could say the law has become a weapon, that medicine has become a weapon, the food has become a weapon, the water has become a weapon?
Wow, yeah, that's a great way of putting it, I think. Yeah, and anything that we need, basically, is a weapon. Housing is a weapon.
Now, recently, Nikki, I boiled things down to the 2 critical American ideals which are under the most constant and sustained assault. Number 1, the right to own property. We must describe this word property, which is, it begins with yourself and your mind. And then secondly, traditional morality as a virtue, to be respected and admired. Because in the scientific world, they pay no mind of things like morality and immorality. It's only science. And when we talk about science and the scientific method, we have no regard for morality or immorality, only amorality, which is the absence of morality. Take it away, Nikki. Close the segment out for us today.
Well, how about just go with that? Because they claim that the communitarianism is the moral solution to the conflict between capitalism, communism, fascism, totalitarianism, and every other ideology and religion that in existence. In all of history, they have merged everything that anybody has ever believed in or written down and said that we have come up with the best soup for everyone. And so everyone that sees a little bit of something that they believe in it, I think they're being easily misled into thinking that this is a solution. And the thing that you'll get out of our books is that it is a planned, fake, genocidal solution. For all its prettiness and all its claims of being more moral, It is not. It is what you just said. It is amoral. It has no morality that we would even recognize as good human beings. Because I'm basically a good human being.
We got about 30 seconds, so a real quick wrap up, and I got to take us out of here with some music. I gave you every second I could.
Okay, so is that? Are we off now?
No. You got 30-second wrap here, so take
a 30-second wrap. Okay, well, if people want to see us continue this work, they really need to support it. And so, the more orders that we get for the book, the more time we have to keep going, because the fight's not over. It hasn't even started yet. The war against communitarianism hasn't even begun, and it needs to now.
All right, Lark, Nikki, I got to cut it at that point. We've taken every second I could give you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Lark. Thanks, Gary.